Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about Smile 2, which is directed and written by Parker Finn, the same person who made the first Smile back in 2022. I had a really interesting experience watching the first Smile in theaters because I remember seeing the trailer and instantly being reminded of that god-awful 2018 film Truth or Dare, which also involved a bunch of people creepily smiling before killing themselves. And additionally, the trailer as a whole for the first Smile just didn't blow me away. It looked like another generic curse horror film. However, I was pleasantly surprised walking out of the theater. And while I did enjoy the first Smile, I didn't really think it needed a sequel. When this was announced, I sat back and thought, what else can you really do with this concept? It feels like it's the case where the first movie made a lot more money than anticipated on a small budget. So of course, the studio approaches Parker Finn and offers him a deal to make a sequel. And when the trailers dropped for this new Smile, I felt the same way about them as I did the trailers for the first Smile. They didn't really do much for me, and it kind of looked like a bland retread of its predecessor. Then again, I did want to give this the benefit of the doubt because I felt the same way about the trailers for the first one and walked out liking it. I did still have that fear in the back of my head that this would be a rehash of the first film without many new ideas to bring to the table, and it kind of is. But is that really a bad thing? Let's discuss. So Smile 2 follows global pop sensation Sky Riley as she's about to start a new tour. As the pressure of living up to her reputation begins to build, her past traumas return in the form of this curse that we're familiar with from the first film, and thus she must face her dark past in order to regain control of her life before it spirals out of control. I want to start out by saying that I think Sky Riley is a significant improvement on Rose from the first film. And this is coming from someone who liked Rose. I thought Sosie Bacon delivered a very solid performance in that first film, and I did like the character, but she was very timid and reserved, and the psychiatry angle did feel a little played out. This is a very different character in a lot of ways because she's a pop star, she's famous, and this film delves into not only the pressure to be at your best when you're performing, especially when there's a lot of things going on in your personal life that people just don't know about, but it also delves into the way in which it can be suffocating, having all of these people around you that are also trying to leech off of your fame. Tragically, Sky's own mother proves to be not a very good person and only contributes to the pain that she's feeling in her life. And Naomi Scott kills it. I have no idea why this actress has not been cast in more things. The only thing I know her from is the Aladdin remake, and I'm not a huge fan of that film, but super excited to see what she does next. This is genuinely one of my favorite performances of the entire year, to be honest. And it's easy to say, Josh, this is a horror film, and a pretty mainstream horror film at that. It's not like it really takes much to look scared and afraid, but there's so much more going on with this character. She has to go to some very dark, deeply emotional places, and the way Scott is able to transition between these emotions so seamlessly blew me away. She carries a lot of the weight of this film on her shoulders. And along with this lead character, I think this film has a little more nuance than the first one because there are elements of substance abuse, the aforementioned family drama with her mother, and I found this character to be instantly likable, but she still is very flawed, and let's just say she made some very poor choices in her life. Smile 2 also doubles the budget, so it's bigger, more ambitious, sometimes scarier, sometimes clunkier. It almost feels like this is the film that Finn always wanted to make, as if the short film that he made before the first Smile, Laura Hasn't Slept, was the first prototype, and then he built on that with the first Smile, and now this is like his magnum opus that he always wanted to make. The scares range from loud noises that are meant to make you jolt, that are very well telegraphed, to actual genuinely well-crafted moments of suspense that incorporate elements from Sky's past and her trauma, and the way that was brought out through the scares was clever in certain sequences. It makes the torment that she's feeling as this thing terrorizes her much more personal. I also think Parker Finn feels much more assured and confident in his directing here. There's a lot of disorienting camera work, inverted shots that convey the mental disarray going on in this protagonist. I also like to think that the inverted shots are almost a parallel to a frown being an upside down smile. Overall, the camera work is just extremely impressive. The opening scene contains a very long oneer. There's another sequence in which two characters have a conversation in a car, and it flips back and forth between them in a very frantic manner that I thought was extremely effective in conveying the tone of the situation.
Sky, pull it together.
The first two acts of this movie are very familiar. In fact, I would say the foundational storyline here, the backbone of Smile 2, is almost identical to the first. with the exception of we're following a different lead character with some different thematic elements going on, but it is very similar and familiar, but still effective. I want to emphasize that it is effective despite the fact that it's derivative of its predecessor. I think it's slightly less effective in genuinely frightening you because of, this is kind of unfair to say about a sequel, but the first one did it first. So of course it's going to be scarier because we as the audience don't know what is going on yet. So we're learning about this curse as the character does in the first one. In Smile 2, unless you haven't seen the first one, you know exactly how it's going to play out for the most part. So there was a point around the hour mark into this that I was waiting for it to actually do something new and inventive. The last 30 minutes do that, only to eventually pull the rug out from under the audience and basically undo the most compelling idea that it ever goes for. I do think it starts to play with audience expectations as far as what is reality and what is fantasy a bit too much. The first one did that once or twice, but there are 4 or 5 sequences in this movie in which it pulls a bait and switch immediately after, and it basically trains you to expect certain sequences to be fake outs. The ending is very predictable. I went and saw this with a friend, and actually before the film even started, I mentioned to him how I thought it would end, and I was spot on. Granted, I don't dislike the ending, but I do dislike the way it gets there. The scope and the rules of what this curse can and can't do are so ambiguous that it feels like the writers had to cheat to get to that ending. So overall, I enjoyed Smile 2. It has its flaws, particularly in the fact that it doesn't try to take this mythology in any remarkably new directions, but it still has a very compelling lead character. It's consistently scary, it's entertaining. I know jump scares as a whole can be a very derivative way to frighten the audience, but I gotta say, both of these Smile movies have reminded me that they can be effective when built up to properly. There is one scare in this movie that did make me physically jump in my seat. That doesn't happen often. In terms of how it compares to the first one, I don't know, man. It's kind of a trade-off. I think 2 has better acting, better direction, it has more characters, and more nuance in its lead character. But I do think that the first one was scarier, better paced, and once again, it was the first to do this, so I do think it's a little more memorable and the scares were a bit more effective because you don't have the prior knowledge of what this curse can do, so you're learning it with the characters, which makes it more terrifying. Granted, I don't think you really need to watch the first Smile to watch this one. So if you want to get the best experience out of this and you haven't seen the first one, I'd say go check it out. You might enjoy it more than people who have just recently watched the first one. I don't think this would make a very good double feature because you'd probably be burnt out on what is essentially the same concept being executed twice in a row. Despite the fact that I think the first one slightly edges it out, I'm going to give Smile 2 the same score that I gave the first one, and that is 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it. It's a fun little treat for those of us who want to go out in spooky season and see something that gets the heart rate up. It's effective in that regard. So if you do see Smile 2, be sure to let me know down in the comments what you think of it and how it compares to the first one. I'm very eager to hear what people have to say about it. As always, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe as well if you want to see more content like this. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.